Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of HSP TV. I am your host, Barbara, and today I am joined by the beautiful Susan Eckart, and we are going to be talking about mindset shifts for highly sensitive people, otherwise known as HSPs. And I have been looking forward to this topic because I think it is extremely important because I remember all too well that when I didn't know I was an HSP, I didn't even know that it existed. I had a lot of thoughts and ideas about the world, about myself, about the way things worked. And I needed to do some serious shifting in those thoughts in order to embrace who I really am and to embrace my high sensitivity. And it caused for a lot of confusion, a lot of stress, and a lot of things that I see a lot of my clients that I'm helping with also run into. So I think this is going to be an amazing topic. And if you're new to the channel, it would be awesome if you would subscribe. Just hit the little bell below. And if you are liking this topic, it would be amazing if you would ask some questions or just some general feedback on our topic. That would be amazing. But for right now, thank you, Susan, for being here, and thank you for being willing to talk to me about mindset shifts for HSPs.
Oh, Barbara, thank you so much for connecting with me and for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Me too, right? Because we did a pre-interview to see if she would be a good guest, and we really hit it off. And we were just talking about how sad we were that we didn't hit record on that session. That would have been an amazing one too. So I have no doubt that this is also going to be an amazing talk and with amazing value for the people that are watching this channel. So let's dive right in, shall we? So our topic today is mindset shifts for HSPs, and you came up with this topic. What made you want to talk about this specific topic?
Oh gosh, it's at the crux of everything, Barbara. And I realized I've stopped using the term mindset. I've stopped using that term because the word mindset, when you're set on something, what does that mean?
That you cannot change, right?
Yes, exactly. It means you're set on something. And the problem is so many of us are set on the things that we've been told about ourselves, who we are, where we fit in the world. And it's only when we choose to look at all of that and question it that we are free to do what is important, which is the mind shift, right? And now when
Yes.
we do the mind shift, everything changes.
Yes.
Everything changes.
You are absolutely right. It definitely rocked my world. But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. It might be great to take our audience a little bit by the hand and first maybe talk a bit about what do we experience, or what do highly sensitive people in general experience when they're still set in their ways, when the mind shifts haven't happened yet. What are some of the key things that tell somebody that mind shifts are needed?
Yeah, well, if you feel like you are hiding, playing small, if you feel like you are buying into what society is telling you about who you are, what you're capable of, then that is a sign, right? Like I myself didn't find out I was an HSP until my early 50s. And when I learned about it and I did the assessment, I said, oh my goodness, this makes so much sense, because all the things that I had been told, you're too sensitive growing up, I was told that nonstop. You were too. I remember we talked about this, right?
Yes,
And I
grow thicker
believed that.
skin, don't take everything so personal. You really need to learn how to let things go.
Yes. And also, I had a very, very highly attuned sense of other people, like what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I could tell if someone had a negative thought about me, I would feel it,
Mhm.
right? And I would talk about it, and people would say, oh, well, you don't know that. And so I would question myself and doubt myself
Mhm.
until I realized, but wait, no, this is an HSP thing. And I started to change how I saw it. I said, well, if this is an HSP thing and there are other people like me who have this sensitivity, this is a good thing. Like, we could make this work for ourselves. And I changed my mind, and I started to see it as this super strength that I had, and this gift. I'll call it a gift. Some people cringe at the idea of a superpower, but I definitely began to see it as a gift.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Because when we don't know that we are highly sensitive yet, and I only found out by accident when I was 32, then we live a certain way, and the way we are usually doesn't match the people around us. So what then happens is that we start to feel like we are the ones that need to change, that there's something wrong with us, further fortified by things like, are you too sensitive, or you need to grow a thicker skin, and all of these feedbacks that we are getting from our environment make us feel like we need to change. And if you have a gift, I had the gift of knowing. So I knew things I had no business knowing, or no way of knowing, and it scared people. And people made me feel like that was a bad thing. I shouldn't be talking about these things, just like you did. And that further fortified the notion that I couldn't be myself, that there was something that people didn't like about me. And being people pleasers, we naturally then start pleasing the people around us, and it starts with our family, maybe our friends, later our partners, and we try so hard to fit in, to be the person that we think other people want us to be, in order to not be seen as weird or strange, or to be or feel like an outsider, and to have friends. Because at the end of the day, all of us just want to be accepted and loved and part of a group, or at least that's how we feel it. And when we are turning ourselves into a version of ourselves that we don't naturally are, in order to fit in, that's when things start to go wrong, although we don't notice it at first. At first we think, oh yeah, people are saying these things less and less to us, and we get invited to parties, and I seem to have friends now. And in the beginning it feels like, oh, I'm on the right track, right? I'm doing the right thing. Did you experience something like that too?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, I've worked with clients who have come to me because for something else, because they also did not know yet that they were HSPs, right? And they came to me because they were feeling exhausted. They were feeling depleted. They felt burnt out. They felt so much anxiety and even depression, right? And, meanwhile, their primary care doctor is trying to put them on medication for depression, and they're like, but I don't really think I'm depressed, I'm just really like exhausted and depleted, all the signs, right?
Yes.
And so once we did the work and I had them go through the assessment, then they realized, oh, I'm an HSP, what does that mean? Now they started to examine what that means for them, and then understand how their life, the way that they had structured it, was not supportive of them being HSP.
Exactly. That's what I found as well, because I ended up in a severe burnout, not knowing how I ended up there. All the advice of people, people told me, people don't know that they are heading towards a burnout. And then all of a sudden they are in there and they have no idea how they got there. And I thought, how can this be? I knew exactly I was heading that way. I pulled the bell. I went to my manager a couple of times saying, it's going the wrong way. We're derailing, help. And they kept promising help, and it was just not coming. And I didn't know how to handle that. But I knew it was coming, and I felt it a mile away. And then discovering I am an HSP, it explains so much about myself that I previously didn't understand. It felt like I came home to myself. Things like, I'm always cheerful. My normal nature is cheerful and happy and positive and sunny, and all of a sudden that could just switch to being inconsolably sad and crying. And I remember my mom asking me, oh, why are you crying? And I was like, I don't know. Right? She said, did you hurt yourself? No. Did somebody call you a name? No. Then why are you crying? I don't know. And I never really understood it. And there was even a time when they tried to push me into the box or brand me with a label of being a borderline personality, because I could go from happy to sad and back to happy in like the blink of an eye, and they saw that as the definition for borderline personality disorder. And I had no defense against that until I discovered I'm a highly sensitive person. For us, it's possible to feel somebody else's emotions as if they are our own. That is when I learned that it was not my sadness I was crying, it was my mother's. I didn't know it at that time, but looking back and analyzing stuff, it was my mother's grief that I was crying, and it was my mother's sadness that just washed over me, and I was the one shedding the tears while my mom was doing the brave motherly thing, so to say. And more insights like that that just told me like, oh my God, right?
Yeah. And I was one of those people that you were referring to before that did not know I was on that track to burnout, because in my late 20s, early 30s, I worked in very highly competitive, very masculine type environments in consulting firms. And I did rounds of layoffs. Now, as an HSP,
Yeah.
I know you know what that felt like,
All the
right? You're
hurt and the frustration and the anger and the
anger.
disillusion and everything. Yeah.
Yes, so I started to develop these physical symptoms of illness that the doctors couldn't figure out. And I didn't know what it was. And, the doctor started saying, maybe you should go to a psychologist, right?
Yes.
And I ended up quitting corporate life. And only then did I realize, like, it was such a toxic environment for me that I began to heal after I left.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point that you're bringing there, because I also worked in a male environment. I worked in IT and then on the programming department. So aside from the phone lady and the cafeteria lady, I was the only woman in the building.
Mm.
But for those of you who don't understand the significance of what Susan just shared, it's as highly sensitive people, we don't do injustice and we feel everybody's emotions and we love harmony. So being the one that needs to fire people, especially when people perceive it as unjust, and it might even be unjust in our eyes as well. And then all the emotions that people express when they're being laid off, the stress that immediately comes up, the worries about your family, maybe the anger, the sadness, the disappointment. There's a whole bomb of emotions that go off as soon as you tell someone, yeah, you're fired, or in whatever way you bring it, it doesn't really matter. That's the end message that you're getting. And as a highly sensitive person, especially when you haven't learned how to shield yourself from all of these emotions and everything that's happening, then you're caught up in not wanting to disappoint people, trying to please people, the unfairness of it all, the perfectionism of wanting to do good, and then also feeling everything constantly. That's just overwhelm in a nutshell, right?
It was overwhelmed. And then, the fear that it created among the people who stayed behind. And then they would look at me like, oh, you're the one who let them go, right? You
You
did it.
evil, you. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Yeah.
really hard. And just the sadness as well. There had been some really long-term relationships that, they were mourning the loss of that friendship in the workplace. And so it was a lot to carry. And I just
Yes.
didn't realize how much I was carrying it at the time.
Hmm. Yes, exactly. And that's what happened on my project, right? I was the project manager, and one of our biggest clients had taken away half of our work. And we were basically living off that one client. So we should be glad that they didn't take away all the business. But half of the business meant that half of my company was on the verge of being fired. And luckily, in air quotes, we had this potential new client that was a really big bank in the the Netherlands, and that could potentially mean a lot of income, a lot of projects, and that my coworkers were not being fired. So no pressure. And then we had this representative of the client that liked to play games and liked to see how many buttons of yours he could push before you just exploded.
Oh
And
no.
then the collaboration was not smooth, and I was responsible for the team, that they had everything that they wanted, but also was micromanaged by the director because this was such an important project. He didn't trust me to do my job, and I had no say in anything. Everything had to be run by him, and everything that went wrong on the project, the boss threw me under the bus. It was
Oh.
always my fault. So this whole combination of factors was the thing that drove me over the edge. Also, this big sense of responsibility and this people pleasing in a sense, because you want the project to go well and the customer to be happy and sign a new contract so that your coworkers don't lose their job and your boss is happy and everybody's happy. There's a whole lot of things, a whole lot of factors that play into it. And I don't know how it is for you, Susan, but I remember in that period I was sort of jealous of the people that had their PC turned off a couple of minutes before 5, were in their code, and as soon as the clock was 5, they would go in the car. They never took work home, and they were not personally involved, and they never really seemed to be so worked up about the things that were happening as I was.
There weren't many of those in the organizations I worked for, but they would quickly be gone, those. But no, but you know what worries me, Barbara? The people who stay in those environments,
Yes.
even though it's toxic for them. And I did a research study earlier this year. I put out a questionnaire thinking maybe I'll get 30 responses, and I got 1,168 responses.
That's awesome.
It was really amazing. And then I followed up with like 20 or 25 one-to-one calls to dig deeper. And what I heard a lot was these women who were still employed in 9-to-5 positions, that they felt they were getting trampled. They were feeling like they were crumbling into a tighter ball every year.
Yep.
The walls were closing in. And yet they didn't really give themselves permission to explore alternatives, whether it was a new environment, still 9-to-5, or the idea of entrepreneurship, which you and I both pursued, right?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing because I call these the rules, the bullshit rules of life. They are about the way things are supposed to be. And we are being taught that we need to choose one profession, then get a good education, have a good paying job, then find a spouse, get married, buy a house, have children, maybe a dog, and then live that life for the rest of your life. That's sort of the societal propaganda of how life should be, right? And I never knew what I wanted to be. When they asked me when I was younger, I would say, well, happy. What do you want to be when you grow up? Well, happy. Well, that was not an answer they were accepting. And a lot of people then have invested time in their careers, and they chose something and they did an education, and now they're working in it. And yes, they are miserable. But I remember from my own thoughts, but also what I hear back from all of my clients, is that a lot of us seem to think, well, that's the way it's supposed to be, right? Everybody is miserable in their job, and you work to live, and it's necessary evil that brings in the cash that pays the bills, and it will not be any better anywhere else. So just accept it, get used to it, learn to live with it. All of these concepts that we tell people to sort of settle into their existence.
And that is exactly why we get stuck in a mindset that tells us these things, right?
Yes.
It's like the ego mind chatter says all those things. That's why it's called work. It's not supposed to be enjoyable. Like, who are you to think that your job should actually be fun?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? It's that kind of ego chatter that I always say the ego is an echo. It is not us. It's not our true inner voice. It's an echo of all the things that society has conditioned us to believe.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And if you are facing something like this, then I would like to invite you to listen to that voice and then think, who does that voice actually belong to? Is it your voice, or is it your mother's voice, or your father's voice, or maybe your uncle's or your grandfather's or a teacher? Whose voice is it that's actually saying these things? Because chances are very, very high it's not your voice. You just took it over and as the way things were supposed to be. And it's understandable, right? Because a lot of these bullshit rules, these rules, came to existence right after the Second World War, when everybody needed to work really hard to rebuild society, where you should just, pull your weight, put your shoulder underneath it and go, go, go. And it wasn't supposed to be fun because everything was in shambles and it needed to be rebuilt. So usually there are lots of really good reasons for these rules at the moment of conception.
Right.
But what a lot of people don't seem to grasp is that we should and have the ability to question them.
Mm-hmm.
Is this my truth? Does this actually work for me? Is this something that fits me? Because a lot of my clients also say, when I bring up the entrepreneurship thing, it's like, oh, I can already not handle the stress of a job, let alone the stress of an entrepreneur. I'm sure I cannot do that, right? This is also a mindset thing.
It is a mindset thing. And I think it's in part because they hear that, entrepreneurs tend to work even more hours than when you're working a day job. But the difference is when you are in alignment with your passion and your purpose, everything is different, right?
Yes.
So the same work or amount of work that you used to put in your day job that depleted you, now you're excited about doing the work. It doesn't feel like work, and you're constantly re-energized because you're tied to your purpose, which is
Yes.
motivating and energizing.
And that's exactly it, right? Because we don't love our job, because it's not feeding our soul, because it's sucking our soul dry. We have a lot of stress and we have difficulty handling our jobs. And we think, oh, entrepreneurship is even more stressful and I'm barely managing this. And I'm not going to lie to you, there are stressful moments in being an entrepreneur, of course. But stress is part of life. But being able to have this freedom, the freedom to work with whomever I want, the freedom to work wherever I want, on anything I want. It's liberating. And when you tap into who you really are and what lights you up from the inside, and you turn that into a job, then it doesn't feel like working, because you're doing the things that you love doing.
Yes, yes, yes. That is fabulous. Exactly. And that's why connecting with your inner why is so important. That Simon Sinek book that was so popular a few years
Yes.
back, talking about corporations having their why at the center. But I think it's the same thing for people. We have to be connected to our why. Otherwise, everything becomes a drudgery. Everything is depleting our battery every day until we connect with that why. And then it's just like this instant recharge. We become like rechargeable batteries. Right?
Yes.
Constantly getting re-energized by our purpose. And when we reconnect with that mission that we have, that we feel this sense of I have to do this because this is why I'm here, and this is where all my gifts point toward. We are in such an empowered space that we can overcome things like visibility fear and speaking fears and all of that.
I love that. And I'm an image thinker, so an image immediately popped into my head, right? Before, when you're in the drudgery of your 9 to 5, you're like a dishwasher. It's rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And it's wet and it's soggy and it smells and it's not nice, but you rinse and repeat. You're doing your job. And now when you become someone who taps into your soul purpose, and it usually means becoming an entrepreneur, but not always. I've also coached a couple of people who found an employment job with lots of liberties and exactly the niche that they want. So it is possible, but then you become more like a solar charger, right?
Mhm.
You take in the energy from the things around you, and that charges your energy so that you have more to give. And then you're like this loop, this perpetual loop that keeps re-energizing itself. And it's beautiful. But before you are there, mind shifts need to
Yes.
happen.
Yes, and part of it is too, I love that you brought up the fact that some people do choose to stay in 9 to 5 employment and find satisfaction there. And that is very true. I work with clients who just realize, because I have a framework method that I use for career alignment. And rather than just looking at the what can you do, go do it, we
Mhm.
look at like 4 other elements. And one of them is fit in your environment. If your environment is not a fit, but you love what you do, maybe it's simply a matter of finding another place in which to do that work where the culture is more supportive, where maybe you don't have a micromanaging boss, where you have an enclosed office space where no, you're not in the middle of an open floor plan.
Oh yeah,
Right,
killing for HSPs. Yeah.
exactly, right. So it's about identifying the needs of your, what I call your personal operating system, right?
Yes.
What are the things that deplete me? What are the things that charge me up? What are the environmental elements that enable me to work in a place of full charge and efficiently, right? And so not being shy about saying I need these things
I
also.
love that you call it your personal operating system. I call it your user manual, but I think it comes down to the same thing, right? It's all about getting to know who you really are and what being an HSP means for you. And for me, it was only part of the puzzle. And I discovered I'm also an extroverted introvert, or an ambivert, as we are called, but I'm also an empath. I'm highly gifted. And there are so many more. I'm a manifesting generator. I have a 6-3 profile if you do something with human design. And then also in the gene keys, and on all of these things for me are parts of the puzzle that make me Barbara, and they're part of my operating system or my user manual. And the better you get to know yourself, the more aligned in your actions you become, in your thinking you become, and in your choices you become. Because in the end, it doesn't really matter what it is that you're doing, as long as it feels in alignment with who you truly are, and it feels like it comes from your core. And that's the thing that I hear a lot of people saying when they're still in the drudgery of their 9 to 5 life, right? They're saying things like, is this all there is to life?
Yeah.
Because I'm supposed to be happy. I have a wonderful partner, I have an okay-ish job, we have a house, I have friends, we go on holiday regularly, but I'm almost ashamed to admit I'm not happy.
Mm.
And why is that, right? Because there needs to be something more. Because if this really is all there is to life, then I'm even more ashamed to say, shoot me now, because I don't know if I want to make it to the end. And I've experienced that people have a lot of shame around all of these topics, about admitting them to themselves, let alone admitting them to their spouses or family or friends. Have you seen that too?
Oh, absolutely. And I will tell you, even I go through it, right? So like I have a husband who is very structured and likes it, and he's not an HSP, he's not an introvert, he's not any of the things that I am. He's not an intuitive. He's very German. and and when I decided that I was going to close down my last business and then emerge as something different and something new, he couldn't believe it. He was like, you're starting again, you're starting over, what are you doing? And it was so foreign for him, the idea, because he's been on a career track his whole entire career, and he's still on it, and then he will retire and then he will be done, right?
Mhm.
Meanwhile, I'm like a cat with 9 lives. I'm like, okay, I'm moving into my 7th one.
Yes,
And and
and
it's
that's
giving ourselves permission.
yes. Exactly. It can be, it's not for everyone, but it can be very normal for us. For me, the human design part plays a role in this, because I am a manifesting generator and you might be one too. I don't know for sure, but what that means that we don't have one thing. We love a lot of things, and we are interested in a lot of things, and we want to try a lot of things, and some things we may finish or we may not finish. Other things we only start, some things we actually do finish. And we like to just go from thing to thing to thing, and then learn a lot from it, and take everything we've learned and then maybe do a new thing. And that's a very normal thing for a manifesting generator. But most of the world is either focused on the real manifester, like Nike, just do it. It's only 8% of the world that can just do it. The other 92%, shocking, right, cannot just do it. And so it's very important that you discover how things work for you, because otherwise you will be frustrated, or you will be angry, or you will be unsuccessful. And then also your profile plays a role. There are profiles like mine that have a lot to learn, with lots and lots and lots of trial and error. And that was one of the things I didn't understand about myself, right? One of the questions I kept asking was, why does this keep happening to me? I'm so done with it. Why did you? And it didn't really seem to matter how much healing I did, how much work I did on myself, how much personal development, how much education, training, courses. It kept happening, or variations of it. And it was very demotivating until I discovered that it's part of my journey to become a mind-blowingly awesome teacher. I have to experience everything.
Yes. And I went into meditation on this because I, like you, am very visual, right? And so I went into meditation on this, and what I saw was this beautiful spiral that was forming in the stars. And it kept expanding and expanding. And the message was that as you unravel the parts that aren't you and come back to who you really are, you are expanding in your knowledge and your awareness. And it's, instead of like it feeling like I'm going from one thing to another thing to another thing, it's you're building and you're coming around similar territory, but each time with a new piece of information, a new perspective, a new angle that you're looking at it from. So really you're doing the work that you were meant to do, just in it's like you're going around the circle and doing it from different ways, right?
I love that. And it's so true.
Yeah, it was so comforting to see that and to understand it and embody that permission to, you know, it's like, if you think about it, like the 3 is on the clock in that same spot all the time. It never gets to be the 6 or the 9.
No. Yes, and it took me a long time to realize the thing that you were just sharing, because my paradigms, and the paradigm is a belief that we hold, usually based on something that we have been told or taught. My paradigm was that if you weren't successful, you needed to work harder, and you needed to try harder. And so I did. I worked myself into a burnout. That's how hard I tried. And you need to find these puzzle pieces for yourself. And that's why the first couple of mindset shifts that need to happen are on the area of loving yourself, knowing yourself, accepting yourself for who you really are, not the version that you have for your friends, the version you have for your coworkers, the version you have for your parents, but who you really are. And then having the guts, I want to say, to be that person no matter what, no matter who you encounter, no matter what situation you're in, and be comfortable in it.
And here's the wild thing, Barbara. I mentioned this in a meeting last week, and there was a woman there who said, I think I'm an HSP. And she was saying something wasn't working for her. She's like, I think I need a different business model. And I said, it's very interesting. We tend to look outside ourselves for the solutions, when really the solution is inside and we just need to look within and examine. And she said, it's scary.
But it is, because it's much easier to attack something outside of yourself, right? Because then you can come up with a plan of action. If it's a lack of knowledge, then I just do a couple of studies and then I have, more knowledge. Or if it's a block, then I'll work on that block. Or if it's a health problem, then I work on healing. So we perceive those things as easy because we sort of know an action plan, or otherwise we Google an action plan. But what type of action plan do we have for inside ourselves, right? And I think at least 80% of the world, which is the non-highly sensitive people, but also the unaware highly sensitive people. So the number is higher than even the 80%, but they're mostly focused on the outside world and what other people will think about us, and if they will like us, if they will accept us. And that's the HSP part. But the non-HSP parts are just focused on themselves and do whatever they feel and they want and they need without thinking about the other people. And if we measure ourselves to those examples, then it never works.
Well, here's the mind shift. It is scary because what? Why is it scary to look within? Is it because we fear that we will find something that is broken?
I think it's the fear for the unknown. We're scared of what we may find and what that might mean and what we then need to do.
Interesting. Because I think, and when I work with my clients on this, the premise and the understanding and the belief that precedes, that serves as the foundation, is that we are all perfect as we are. Our original state. Like when you think back to when you were 2 and 3, you were your little, I could see you as a 3-year-old, Barbara. You were probably very spunky.
Yes.
This beautiful, perfect light, right? We're not shy about who we are at that stage in our life. We're just perfectly who we are. It's only when the outside world starts telling us there's something wrong with how you are, that's not the way you should be, that we then think there's something wrong with us. But when we look within, we reconnect with that beautiful, perfect 3-year-old that we were.
I love that you're sharing that.
Exactly who she was, right? Yes.
But that's true, right? We are born into this world perfect. And when and I think it goes wrong as soon as we go to school. That's when it starts shifting. But before we go to school, we don't question ourselves. We don't question, will I ever be able to walk? Does this pants make me look fat? No, none of these things cross our minds. We have total belief in ourselves, and what we put our mind to, we can accomplish. And I was in that wild and I was adventurous, and they gave me a harness because they kept losing me. Because I found everything so interesting. So they lined me like a dog, because otherwise I would just wander away. And that's beautiful. And that is your original self. And your original self is completely perfect. But then when we go to school, it's like a factory with a funnel, and all of these little children go in, and what comes out is everybody's more or less the same. And that's what school does, right? We learn all the same things, and our behavior is corrected in the same way, and usually there's no room for individualism.
That is so true. I think school is so damaging in that way, isn't it? And then it becomes a lifetime of us peeling back the layers to get back to who we are, right? Like
who we already were.
Yes, to who we already were to begin with before everybody else messed it up, right? And that's why I have a book that I'm working on releasing in the next couple of weeks called You 1.0. And a friend of mine, I told her about the book and she said, why 1.0? Don't you want it to be 2.0, 3.0? I said, no, the point is our original version is perfect. So we have to reclaim that original version, right?
Yes, I totally agree. It's funny that your book title is that, because mine is becoming who you always were.
There you go. Exactly.
Which is roughly on the same idea, right? And that's in essence, that is what the mindset shifts are about for HSPs, becoming who you always were, letting go of everything that's not serving you, that you acquired along the way, that's not part of your original blueprint, and getting to know this original blueprint and learning to work with it, be proud of it, love it, and then tap into its unlimited potential.
Yes. Beautifully stated.
Right? Because that's in the end what it's about. That's why I say getting to know your user manual, because you need that strong foundation of who you actually are in order to build your life and your business or your job on top of. Because as a business owner, for instance, I am a creative visionary. So I can speak, I can inspire, I can create, I can think, I can make, but I'm not very good at the business side of things. I don't really care about the numbers and the spreadsheets and you know, all of those types of things. So I very quickly, because in the beginning I did my own books, but I very quickly outsourced it to an accountant because it's not giving me joy or pleasure. I'm very happy that I know how to do it, but outsource it. And that's part of why you need to know yourself so well, so that you can see, where is my brilliance, where do I shine, what should be the focus in my business, and then finding other people to do all the other things.
Absolutely. I have a model I call stop, drop, and offload. Because stop, drop, and roll when you're on fire. So
Yeah.
this is like, if you're burning out, stop, drop, and offload. So stop doing the things you don't love doing. Stop, drop the things that you're not very good at, and then offload the things that is not worth your time to do.
Exactly. Spot
Especially when
on.
you're an entrepreneur.
Yes. Exactly. So we've been talking for a while, and I think it's been amazing. I think we hit upon some really amazing points. So again, if you are watching or listening to this episode, it would mean the world to me if you could show us your support, maybe share it even with your audience, because if it was insightful or useful to you, then chances are very high you know people who should also be listening to this talk, and we thank you very much. It would also be amazing if you would subscribe to this channel, so you will never miss another video again. But I can also imagine that you think, well, this has been really awesome, but how do I do this? Do I do this by myself? Where can I start? How can I reach you? So, Susan, where can people find you?
Well, my home base is really LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn, and I go under Susan Eckart, MA, M as in Mary, A, because there's a Susan Eckart who doesn't look like me who's on LinkedIn also. She's blonde.
Yes.
That's really my home base there. I have a group on Facebook that is a free group. It's called Soulful Mindset Mastery, for people who are on Facebook and would like to be part of a loving community that is full of introverts and HSPs.
I love it. And don't worry if this went too fast. I will make sure that all the links mentioned are included in the show notes. So probably down here, maybe to the left or the right, I'm never sure, but probably down here you will find all the links. So please reach out to both me or Susan if you feel like you just want to talk, or you want to explore, or you need some help, or whatever. That would be awesome. And to finalize our talk here today, what would be some final tips or advice you could give our listeners of today?
The biggest piece of advice that I have is to ensure, as you go about your day to day, that you incorporate a little bit of time for quiet for yourself. It's so important, and so many women that I speak to feel guilty about doing that. Men too, in this doing culture, we're so focused on being busy, and we feel guilty if we take time to just stop and rest. But being is also a form of doing.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're sharing that. And it's actually what I've been practicing this week, because I was in that part where you talked about when I was just starting. I thought, well, if I was shopping or enjoying the sunshine when everybody else was working, I sort of felt guilty, right? Yeah, am I not supposed to be working right now? And We've had an amazingly shitty summer. I cannot say anything other than that. We've had 7 or 8 weeks of nonstop rain, and now we are finally having some sunshine here. And I am having a very light week, and I blocked the rest of my week, and I'm going to the water and enjoying the sunshine every day without feeling guilty, because this is the time where I need to re-energize myself to be the best version of myself in order to serve my audience to the best of my ability when the sunshine goes away. And that is also a mindset shift, where you need to shift away from thinking that you always need to be productive, that you always need to be doing something. The to-do list will never end. The to-do list is never done. And the sooner you know this and accept this and learn to work with it and stop feeling its pressure, the better off you will be.
Absolutely, absolutely, Barbara. This has been so much fun.
Yes, it has been fun. Thank you so much for being here, Susan, for sharing your wisdom. Thank you, viewer, watcher, listener, for being here as well, for your support for this channel, for being here always. And I hope to inspire you again with my next guest next week. But for right now, thanks for being here, Susan, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Enjoy the sunshine, Barbara.